Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Bill Martin. I've been a meteorologist for a long time in the Bay Area, and I've been around a lot of tsunamis and earthquakes over the years. I studied some of this stuff at University of California, and I wanted to talk about something that happened, sort of what something's happening here. It's the Pacific Ring of Fire. It's the subduction zones. It's all the things you know about the earthquakes in the Bay Area and in California. But I want to talk about what happened this night. This was 2011. And this is a Japanese earthquake and subsequent tsunami. And this video, it's stunning. So I'm working in the newsroom because it was 10:38 at night, I think, and the night this happened. And this video starts coming in on the feeds. In the old days, we'd have feeds that would bring the information, the video into like Reuters or AP. And somebody showed it to me, and I was like, "Oh my God!" So at the newsroom was like, "Okay, well, we got ourselves a flood." And, tsunamis not well understood, but had never. This is the first time this has been seen. A tsunami had been seen live, in even video of a tsunami, but live video. So I'm watching this in real time. I go up to Mike Kelly, our executive producer, and I go, buddy, we gotta stay on the air. We can't go off the air with it because I mean, imagine if you're me. And the reason it resonates so much is because I did study these things, but it was always almost not hypothetical, but it was pretty much like diagrams and one grainy picture from Hilo, Hawaii in the 50s when there was a receding of the water that went out and people went out and there's like a couple snapshots, but it was real grainy. I was like, oh my God, that's a tsunami. That's all I ever saw. So to see this, I mean, even now, even 2025, this is stunning video of a tsunami. And so I was thinking about it a lot because we do live in an area where there are tsunamis. Now, earthquakes kill more people. The Pacific Ring of Fire is what we're going to talk about today, and subduction zones. Subduction zones this was from a subduction zone earthquake. Subduction zones have the ability to produce large tsunamis, but not every time. So earthquakes take out more people because there's so many earthquakes. You'll see that too. But the tsunamis can be devastating. The Indonesian tsunami in 2004 took out almost 250,000 people. It's horrible. And then the Japanese tsunami, 18,000 people were killed. So the earthquakes are more destructive, but the tsunamis are really just more terrifying. And when you see the video, I mean, like I said, I had never seen video before that before. So going from studying something, and it's like seeing a unicorn or something. It's like, oh my God. I mean, that I couldn't find some of the video we had that night. I don't know where it went, but some of the video from the choppers showing the town and being inundated and people fleeing. It was like really like a movie. This is the, Mercator projection of the world, of our world. And you can kind of see, I'm going to push a play on it. This is the earthquakes over the last 20 years. And you see where it's lit up mostly. So you can see the Ring of Fire without me pointing it out to you, right? Ring of Fire. So it starts here about Mount Lassen, goes through the Prince Rupert Sound, comes down around here by Japan, and down to Indonesia. So this horseshoe shape, like that. That's the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is an area where volcanoes are created because of the subduction zones and because in tsunamis and because of the way the plate tectonics work. Plate tectonics work because the stuff that Earth is made of, the crust, is continuing to grow. The center of the Earth's hot. The magma comes up, it boils up, and it comes out in these rifts in the ocean, in places in the ocean, actually in the land too. And it's growing. It's constantly making more land, and these plates kind of float around, and they're getting moved around because there's more stuff coming in. The Pacific plate, which is the one that is clearly outlined here, Pacific plate moves northward at about 2 inches a year. It moves northward at about 2 inches a year. So in 10 years, that's 20 inches, that's 2 feet in 10 years. So that's that far that the entire plate is shifting. So strains get built up, stresses get built up. And in some areas, you get an environment where like the San Andreas Fault, the two plates meet, the Pacific plate, the North American plate, but they run side by side. So through Los Angeles, through San Bernardino, up into Cayucas, and even up into Gilroy and those areas, the plates are running side by side. You're not going to get a tsunami typically from that. You're going to get earthquakes from that, which we see. But where you do get the tsunamis and the big earthquakes are in these subduction zones where, in the case of, here, I'll put a pause on that. That's just sort of a summary of all the big quakes. The land's moving northward, but because of the way the continent sits, it starts to subduct underneath. And when it subducts, it melts, magma comes up, volcanoes are formed, and you get this subduction zone. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. And I think it's relevant to talk about because, again, we live here. And most earthquakes, I think I wrote this down, 90% of the world's earthquakes are in that zone. 90% of the world's earthquakes. 75% of the world's active volcanoes are on that area. So you go, what? Earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, all related. Bigger earthquakes on subduction zones, volcanoes on subduction zones, and when you do get a tsunami off a subduction zone, as we did in Alaska in 1964, you have some pretty major issues. So here's the Pacific plate. It hits the North American plate, the continental crust. It's heavier, the ocean plate is, and it dives under. These are the plates, right? They're moving. So they got, instead of rubbing together, they're getting pushed together. So this heavier plate dives down, right? Well, it gets hot down here. It's really hot. So it bubbles up as magma, and you get Mount Shasta, Mount Lassen, Mount McLaughlin, Mount Rainier. This whole chain, that's in North America. This whole trench is the subduction zone. That's where you get your big earthquakes. And the reason the earthquakes get so big is because as this area here, I think I can do this. See how it's like a conveyor belt? Well, the lighter continental crust gets pushed back, gets pushed way back. I'll do it with my hands. So it gets pushed back, and then finally, boom, it pops, and it displaces bazillions of gallons of water. Last time the Cascadia subduction fault had a big earthquake was like 300 years ago. And so it's kind of due. So everything's due because the Earth's constantly growing. It's not a scare thing. It's just this is how this stuff goes. Every subduction earthquake, mega subduction fault earthquake, does not result in a tsunami. But when they do, they can be devastating, as we've seen. So we'll move here. Let's try to get this out. I tend to do this on the fly. So this is all the earthquakes in the last 100 years, and I don't try to count them up. But I think the thing to note is, first of all, where are the big ones, right? These are all subduction zones, all subduction zones, all subduction zones. A lot of earthquakes here, and a lot of earthquakes here, but you see they're not as big. The dot represents the bigness. They're not as big as the subduction zone quakes. So this over just the last 100 years. I just want to give you an idea. So the Alaskan earthquake, 1964, was a 9-0, over 9, pardon me, and lasted for almost 4 minutes, right? So that's, so you had a lot of things with that. You had an earthquake, you had a tsunami, and you had lots of kind of in the sounds up by Alaska and then some of the lakes, the glacial lakes, there were a lot of landslides, and those landslides created tsunamis too. There's different kinds of tsunamis. There's the subduction zone tsunami, which did happen in Alaska, but it also created landslide tsunamis, which is another way to get a tsunami, like, Channel Islands in Santa Barbara. They had a big landslide back in a long time ago, and that big landslide created a displacement of the water, and there was a huge flood in Santa Barbara in historic times. That's why the Mission is way up on State Street. That's why they didn't build the Mission on the beach. That's why the Native Americans built their villages. You'll see where you can just go around and look for where the Native Americans built their villages, and you can figure, that's probably they at one point had a tsunami. There are volcanic eruption tsunamis, underwater volcanoes, certainly. There's the big one, which is terrifying, which are rare, are the meteorites, right? You get a meteorite the size of a football field, hits the Pacific Ocean. That's biblical stuff. They're very, very rare, fortunately. But that would be devastating. You get a 100, 200-foot wave. Pretty easy. It depends on the size of the unit. And then the meteo tsunami is from weather, like meteorology. And that's just the storm comes in, it's windy, it pushes water ahead of it. We've seen this in big storms on both coasts. But you also get a deep enough low, the low actually lifts up the water pressure, and it lifts the water up. So meteo tsunami, I've never really would never refer to anything as a meteor tsunami, just that it can. I imagine they're pretty minor in terms of their, well, maybe not, depends where you are. But so those are the different types. But we're looking at subduction type, and this is what the subduction stuff is. So you can see I'll just put it in motion here. You'll see the crust this going this way, and then you'll start to see this area gets pushed back a little bit. And as it starts to push back, and then, well, this is actually out by Prince Rupert Sound. This is where when it got pushed back and then came forward, the land rose. Like, what it raised? Like, it rose like 30 feet here and dropped like 4 feet there. So we'll do it again. So here's, see how the continental plate's getting pushed back. This is a subduction zone. This is going underneath this. Hits, boom. So then you get an uplift here and a downstroke here. So the land around Prince Rupert Sound dropped a solid, well, I mean, I'm told 30 feet, which is almost impossible to believe. I'm sorry, uplifted in here up to 30 feet, and then dropped like 8 feet here. But that's incredible when you look at just the sheer scale on that. So very powerful. The megathrust deformation zone is, in that Alaskan area, is one of the main areas for really large earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis, and there you see it again. So we'll look at 120 years of earthquakes, and you'll see, if you'll look up in that Aleutian Island area up in here, you're going to see a lot of hits. Remember, 100 years, so this is going to be a lot of dots. There's a tsunami. The purple areas represent subduction zone tsunamis, essentially, and you'll see it works out to like almost every 10 years, there's a pretty decent sized tsunami in the Pacific. So we're at 1921 now. Boom, boom, 2 big ones in 1923 and 4. And these are earthquakes. The bigger the dot. This is from NOAA. This is an awesome graphic. I love this. Mesmerizing. But you see clearly the Ring of Fire, another tsunami from Japan. Very active. This area, and when you look at these graphics, when they're all said and done, you're going to see that it pans out that this area here, there's a big one, this area all up in here, this subduction zone is very aggressive in terms of producing big earthquakes and big tsunamis. And it's not going to end. It's just what it is, right? The Earth's growing, the plates are growing. They got to go somewhere, so they move, and as they move, they create this. And the diving underneath the North American plate is what really starts the volcanic activity and creates the megathrust earthquake fault. And then clearly you can see 1978. I know it's a lot. They did some time on this. I'm not sure it's exactly right, and it's hard to keep an eye on it, but you definitely see where the most activity is. I think I'm going to move it forward a little bit here. Let's see if I can go forward a touch. Maybe not. I don't think I can. Here we go. Let's do that. Okay, so let's go forward. I want to show you, okay, so that's basically it. And the thing to note, this is over 120 years, but the thing to note is the size of right up here. If you can see the United States and Japan and Indonesia down here, but you see the areas, the biggest quakes, Mount Lassen northward, boom, 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 down here into Indonesia, not as subductive here, but then you get back into subduction in South America, bigger quakes, obviously. So they're very much correlated with certainly large quakes, but also tsunamis that can be damaging. This is a great Alaskan quake. I got a story about this. I was camping with my parents when I was 6 years old in 1964. And the Alaskan quake was a big one. It was over 9.0. It lasted almost 4 minutes. The shaking didn't stop for almost 4 minutes, and it produced a tsunami. We were camped up on a bluff in Fort Bragg. I remember hearing it sounded like a river, right? And we were. It wasn't massive tsunami in Fort Bragg, but it was in Crescent City, just to the north. And the next day we went down to the beach, and there were just big driftwood everywhere. Like things didn't look right? It just didn't look right. And the thing I remember most was being a little kid. It was kind of a foggy day. It was April. The water was just, 6 to 10 hours later, the water was just not calming down. And that's the thing when you look at this Alaskan tsunami propagation kind of model trying to recapture it, you see, I mean, we're moving on. We're a couple, 12, 20 hours from the main event, and the ocean is still rumbling to its core. So these tsunamis have a huge, huge impact. The speed of a tsunami is stunning in these subduction zones, in any zone, because you can get a tsunami from a landslide. They move really fast. And in the case of, let's say, the Alaskan tsunami, the depth of the water, let's call it 4,000. That's what I wrote it down actually. 4,000 meters. The way to get the speed of a tsunami, and the way it makes sense, is you go square root of gravity, which is 9.8 per meter per second, times 4,000 feet, the depth, 4,000 meters. That gives you 200 meters per second, and that ends up at 450 miles an hour. So this thing's going as fast as a jet plane. And they don't really show up. They move fast in the open ocean. But as soon as they get into the shallow water, the water starts to recede. That's why the water goes out, and then this wave starts to grow. It gets shallower and shallower. It slows down, and that slowing down wads up all the energy and creates a very, very large, much larger wave than you would see out in the open ocean. And so what you're seeing here essentially is basically, let me see, I move a little farther forward here. I think it's still, yeah. Basically, you're seeing the result of that. And once it gets shallow, it just surges water inland. So that's Indonesia. This is also, or no, that's Japan. This is Japan too. Some more video that we found. And there's a lot of it out there, but it's devastating when you see it. And one of the things that happens in tsunamis, I mentioned this before, but earthquakes are the thing that kill most people. Tsunamis don't. They kill a lot of people. Like the Indo quake was almost 250,000 people in 2004. And then the Japan quake in 2011, 18,000 dead. But earthquakes happen so often. There's many, many, many more earthquakes than there are tsunamis. So I think this is Indonesia. This was the 220, this is the one with the huge, huge death toll. And the video is not very good, but it just illustrates the power, right? And, it's one of those things, almost every culture has a story, a flood story from the past. And, I think that's what we're looking at here. So remember, this whole thing is about the plates moving about 2 inches a year. They got nowhere to go. They go side by side and create friction, or they subduct. Now, the Ring of Fire, it's called the Ring of Fire because of the volcanoes. That's where the subduction zone is. And that's where the most dangerous faults are, in my mind, because they typically can be your largest faults. And you can also get tsunamis, but not always. We've had plenty of them where you don't get tsunamis. What else do we got here? 75% of the world's active volcanoes are on the Ring of Fire. 90% of the world's earthquakes are in our backyard. That's a 25,000 square mile or 25,000 mile horseshoe around the northern Pacific. And there's subduction zones, there's transcurrent faults, there's all sorts of different faults, but the most aggressive in terms of large earthquakes and tsunamis would be this subduction zone. And we talked about it. So one more time, until you sound like, just so you know, because I think one of the things we take for granted is like, well, it's easy to be scared of this stuff, or you can just go, yeah, it is how it is. It is how it has been, and it's how it's going to be, especially for California. So this area gets pushed backwards and backwards and backwards till it pops, and that lifts up the water and pushes the tsunami. And then the volcanoes, we understand that mechanism as well because of the melting. So I have a story when I was watching the last tsunami warning we had. This is Ocean Beach today. I was watching that last tsunami warning we had, and this was a few months ago, and Hawaii had a tsunami warning, and I was watching Hawaii, and what you see when there's a tsunami coming is the water goes way out. And the more farther it goes out, the more dangerous it is, because that typically means the wave is bigger. It's got a huge wavelength, not seconds, but hundreds of miles, the wavelength. So when it pulls out, it's trying to fill that gap. But then when it's going back out is when people, like in Hilo, ran down to the beach to collect shells and think, oh, this is awesome. There's a lot of stories like that of cultures, because it's not a normal thing to have tsunamis. They happen, but it's not every 20, 30 years. They happen every 10 years or so easily. But a big one that impacts a lot of people, it's a rarity, but when it does happen, it's confusing what you see. And so one of my big beefs now is we had that warning the other day, and everybody flocks out to Ocean Beach. I saw some kids in Haleiwa Harbor that were live streaming, and I'm watching it live, and the water's going out, and they're like, "Oh, the water's going out. This is cool. This is awesome." And I'm like, I typed it. You gotta go, man. I go, that you don't know how big that wave's going to be that comes in. You can guess, but my point being, when there's a tsunami warning, stay clear. Okay, so we've got subduction zone, ring of fire. Most earthquakes in the world occur on our Pacific Ring of Fire, and we're right in it. Part of mostly Northern California, Cape Mendocino North, Mount Lassen. That's where your subduction zones are, right? The Cascadia subduction fault zone, which is hasn't busted hard in 300 years. So yeah, of course it's due. You're probably seeing a lot of that on the internet right now, but a lot of stuff is due. There's San Andreas is due. The Hayward fault is due. It's due because, right, this is how the Earth works. All right, thanks for bearing with me. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope I drove it home. I'm not a geophysicist or anything like that. I just think it's important. If you can understand these concepts, you can make better decisions about where you build your house or where you go on the weekend or just how you react to things, okay? All right, we'll see you back here.